Hello, my name's Ruth and I am one of the co-founders of the Literary Lancashire Award. Welcome to this instalment of Write Your Future, where we bring you professional writing tips and advice to help you get started with the competition. Today we've been talking to Taj, who is a wonderful screenwriter and dramatist, so let's see what he had to say. Would you like to introduce yourself, Taj, to everyone?
Yeah, my name is Tajinder Singh Hayer. I'm a scriptwriter and I'm a lecturer in creative writing at Lancaster University.
Wonderful. So you've said you're a scriptwriter. What kind of things do you like to write about?
The things that inform my writing are kind of issues of cultural, ethnic, regional, national identity. Those have been kind of recurring themes in things that I've written. And particularly over the last kind of 8 years, I've become much more interested in being in dialogue with genre as well. I really like actually picking a specific genre, frequently science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and sort of looking at what the rules are for the genre, seeing if I want to follow those rules. And sometimes, it's interesting to follow those rules, or do I want to talk back to those rules?
So the LLA competition is mostly focused on poetry and prose. And your specialism is writing scripts and drama. Yeah. How do you think those disciplines, do they interact? Do they inform each other? Are they so different that it's not worth making the comparison? Or
our national playwright was a poet as well, Shakespeare. I started off writing poetry as well. There we go. I've compared myself to Shakespeare.
Fantastic.
Yes, and I started off writing poetry. The reason I kind of stopped writing poetry is because I think I got slightly stuck in one voice. Okay. I wasn't able to do the thing which actually lots of poets can do, which is find personae for the poems that they're writing. Because I think once I found myself doing that, I found myself writing scripts. Yeah. But that process of being a poet at the start, of writing poetry, of the awareness of phrasing, of almost breath that I think a lot of poets have, became really useful to me when it came to constructing dialogue. Because I've always enjoyed the process of writing dialogue, and I think the thing that I've always struggled with theatre is bigger structural stuff, finding the story, whereas actually I quite like writing dialogue, and so for me, writing poetry at the start and this awareness of the weight of words and the ways that the performability of lines became really useful for constructing dialogue, because I think particularly not necessarily naturalistic dialogue, but just from a performer's point of view, having a sense of how sayable a line is a really useful skill to have. So for me, I kind of think that there is a massive craft benefit in trying experimenting with different forms.
Because something else that LLA does is give prompts for writers so that they need to fit into a certain kind of category. Do you ever use prompts?
When you mention prompts and like an external prompt, often in my line of work, I have to deal with sort of commissioning briefs. There'll be often situations where I can kind of do a spec script where it's just an idea that I'm playing with, but sometimes I'll be responding to a specific external trigger. So, for instance, the most recent work that I did, I say recent, again, it's one of those works that I wrote it and then it came back in an audio form. But I'm working with a company called Ragged Edge Productions, run by Stephanie Screet, who has been a director in residence at the Theatre by the Lake up in Keswick, and lots of stuff with the Dukes. And Stefan kind of came to me and said, look, I've got this project called Keeping the Lights On, and basically there's been funding secured for it. And it was to respond to the very specific brief of the future of energy production in the Northwest.
Oh, wow.
Which on the surface kind of was like, okay, that's a really, that kind of feels like very specific. And how do you address that? How do you address that in a way that isn't like, this is an infomercial? Do you know what I mean? That was the thing.
Yeah.
But then what Stefan did was, well, the initial aims for the project was for it to be theatre-based, and a group of playwrights would respond to particular elements and be a series of playlets performed. What happened was that it was decided that we'd do a kind of a sort of a live performance that would also be a radio performance. And this was showcased at the Duke's like a couple of years ago as a developmental thing. And each of the playwrights, we were given a specific area of energy production to work with. So somebody had solar power, somebody had nuclear power. I had the tidal power, and we spoke to scientists. We visited Hisham Bay nuclear power station. So really specific kind of elements that, on one level you could think, all right, that might kind of hem in the writer, because you're being given. But then I found it massively liberating, and I found it really great to be able to respond to those prompts. And so for me, I loved that, because I was given, and subsequently what happened was it was supposed to go on tour, but then COVID-19 happened, and it's been turned into like a podcast, which is quite handy because it was like a staged radio play anyway. But for me, kind of being given this prompt of a tidal barrier, I found it fascinating. I found there's been this long-standing project that they want to build a tidal barrier across Morecambe Bay. A bridge that, and it's got its controversies, but I found something almost visually awe-inspiring in that idea to respond to, and then the concept behind it, sort of, well, it's generating power from an element, from something, rising water levels that are the thing, if it's the thing that is making us anxious about the future, that is requiring to reach for more renewable energy sources. So I found it kind of potent with metaphor, and so that for me was great, because it felt like I was being handed stuff, which if Stefan had just come to me and said, okay, we need a 15-minute play about anything, I would have been, I don't know, Halloween cookies.
Yeah, Halloween cookies, fantastic.
Whereas that gave me something very concrete, and that sense of a sort of a structure to work with. The thematic structure in this case, which I found really, really useful. So for that reason, I kind of really like prompts.
I suppose one of the other things I wanted to ask you about is your own early writing career. Did you enter any writing competitions?
Yeah, if we go back to the dark and distant past, nearly 20 years ago now. But during this switch from poetry to script, it happened. I was doing an MA in creative writing at the University of Leeds. Not as good as Lancaster University.
Definitely keeping that in the interview.
But there was the BBC was doing this big project called Northern Exposure, which is because they were moving a lot of stuff north to Media City at that time, and in a typically BBC fashion, they were trying to engage with creative people outside of London and doing it in a really kind of slightly patronising fashion. But so Northern Exposure was all about kind of finding new writing talent and creative talent in general in the north, and they had a range of like outreach projects, but then they also had this competition called the Spin, which was to write a 15-minute radio piece that addressed some element of the industrial north. As I said, it wasn't patronising at all.
Because the north could only be industrial. We couldn't be. Black caps
and all that stuff. And part of me, and again, this is where I think I was slightly responding against that, because I wrote a piece about people trafficking.
Oh wow!
And it was. I mean, I haven't looked back on it in years. I suspect it's fairly callow, but it won. It won it won the competition, and that seal of approval, BBC, was big, like coming quite early in my career was it wasn't shed loads of money or anything like that.
No.
But it opened a lot of doors, and so for me that competition was really, really important because it got things going. There have been plenty of competitions that I have failed to win since, but I have appreciated all of them in that it's given me, it's useful to have a target, and the thing that you write for such a competition, even if it doesn't win, you will still use that work in some way.
Yeah.
It might be that work never gets published or anything like that, but some element of what you did there will appear in your other work.
It's kind of, if you think in comparison to other careers, if you're a journalist, getting an award in journalism is only going to open more doors for you. And in same in, I'm guessing, science and any other career, having those accolades is going to help. And if, as you say, if nothing else, you'll take parts of those projects forward with you to inform the rest of your work. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, it's a kind of a huge confidence boost and validation, which is not to say that, there will be points where equally if you don't win stuff, you can take that tremendously to heart. But then when you realize that, that sometimes, like, I've entered competitions where there's been tens of thousands of people entering, you just got to, and actually having been involved on the other side, kind of running competitions as well, you realize that there's actually lots of really good writing out there. And that's quite heartening, I think, from the point of view of having been involved in the Lancaster Playwriting Prize, for instance. And you almost want to be able to offer more opportunities to people, and you want to, kind of follow up more. But I think they're an important part of our literary cultural landscape, in that sense.
So I just wanted to ask if there's any advice you would like to give to any young writers who are thinking of entering the competition, about whether to do creative writing as a career or any of the above.
I definitely enter the competition.
What's
the worst that can? What is the reason for not entering? Tell me. That's what I would say to anybody who's kind of umming and ahhing in that sense. But going back to kind of what I said about this kind of, it's very easy to kind of sit and wait for a muse to come. That kind of slightly stereotypical picture of the creative writer is kind of waiting for inspiration to strike them. There's nothing wrong in using, I think, kind of external, like the idea of a prompt again, of using that as a way of, I don't know if destabilizing is not the right word, as a kind of just a way of sort of shaking up your practice as much as anything, because you might find yourself exploring new areas of your writing personality, because it's very easy sometimes to conceptualize yourself as, I'm a writer who does this.
To get stuck in that rut of still writing the same things. One
of the things about writing and grappling with writing is the solitary nature of it. Ultimately, yes, you have to sit alone either at a laptop or at a notepad or at a typewriter to write the process. I have to acknowledge, I'm not judging people who are still using typewriters. Leave the pause in the air a little. And so yes, there's that solitary element. But then thinking about the communities of writers out there, but also people who are interested in literature and stimulating kind of a literary cultures and communities that are out there as well. And I think that's quite important. It's a really rambling answer that's sort of trying to collate everything I've said in the whole section, but yeah.
That was brilliant. So thank you very, very much for speaking to us today, and I hope you're all doing well in lockdown, and hopefully speak to you soon.
You too. Thanks, Ruth.